Today will be a quick look at a short interaction I recently had on Twitter. I'm less interested in the interaction itself than I am in how common this problem is and what it often says about how we interact and what's important to many of us. Normally, I cover issues like this from the media perspective, but I think it's important to see how individuals, with no apparent profit motives, still make the same mistakes. The problem is of misrepresenting someone's beliefs, whether purposefully or accidentally. We all make these types of mistakes from time to time, so a modicum of patience should be employed when responding to a misrepresentation of something you said. A quick bit of context here. My original tweet was a reply to someone replying to a Biden statement. Biden's statement was this: 100 days since I took the oath of office, lifted my hand off our family Bible, and inherited a nation in crisis. The worst pandemic in a century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. This was one of the replies. 3,000 Americans died on 9/11. And here was my reply. Although I see your point, I think he's coming from the thought that January 6th was the physical manifestation of a serious and somewhat successful attack on our democracy. No war since the Civil War really represented a threat to the future of our country quite like it. I'd like to stop here for a second before we get to the meat. First, I was primarily trying to establish an alternative viewpoint to what perhaps Biden actually meant. Perhaps he meant that, by itself, without any other factors, the January 6th riot was the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. I don't really know for sure. Plus, even with all the additional factors that built up to and ultimately led to January 6th, I wasn't personally claiming that this was the worst attack on our democracy, although I think that would be a discussion worth having. Next, someone, let's call this person Sam, replied with, "In what universe do you live in where that riot was semi-successful? Did they take over the military? Get any top leader as a hostage or under their control?" So it's rather apparent here that Sam thought I was referring only to the riots as being the attack on our democracy, which, although I feel requires a fairly significant lack of concern regarding what I actually wrote, it's somewhat understandable. I feel that we're in such a bad place in our society right now that it's very easy for our emotions to get the better of us, pushing us to jump to conclusions, misread or mishear what others say, and generally lose our ability to properly engage in any reasonable discussion. Yes, this is Twitter, and Twitter has never been known for reasonable discussions, but what we're seeing is more widespread and dangerous than a few Twitter trolls. But I'll come back around to that at the end. My response was, I didn't say the riot was semi-successful. I said the riot was the physical manifestation of a semi-successful attack on our democracy, meaning the lies and deception. It's not complicated grammar, you just have to read it. Okay. I admit the last sentence was uncalled for, and I'll do a better job avoiding snarky remarks in the future. But at the same time, it's actually important for us to read and understand what we're responding to. Otherwise, we will simply lead ourselves and others down a path of believing falsehoods and becoming more easily deceived by the media and others. Next, Sam writes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Somewhat successful is so very different from semi-successful. There was literally nothing successful about it. I did read it, and it's still complete bull." Of course, I cannot really say what Sam is thinking, or what they read or didn't read, but it seems to me that based on the first sentence, Sam only read that I didn't say the riot was semi-successful. Sam obviously thought I was being a smartass and differentiating between semi-successful and somewhat successful. If Sam had read the rest of my reply, referring to the lies and deception that were the attack, not the riot itself, Sam probably wouldn't have written what they did. My reply was then, "Are you saying that I said the riot was semi-successful?" Again, I did not say that, which I just clarified. At the time I wrote this reply, I didn't realize what I think now Sam was referring to, semi versus somewhat. Sam then replied, "Somewhat successful attack on our democracy. No war since the Civil War really represented a threat to the future of our country quite like it." These are your words, copy-pasted, and they are wrong. You can backtrack all you like, but the internet is forever. What I get here is that Sam still thinks that I said the riots themselves, not what led to them, were the attack. I'm not sure how I could have been more clear. That's not what I was saying. My final reply and the end of the interaction went like, I'm not backtracking. Taking half a sentence, ignoring the key part, and quoting it to mean something different isn't an argument and doesn't show anything. Physical manifestation of is key. It means the attack was what led to the riots, not the riots themselves. Now, you might be thinking that this is just a silly interaction between two people on Twitter and that these things happen all the time. So what? My issue is that yes, they do happen all the time, and it's a serious problem. Plus, based on the likes Sam received, many other people walked away from this also believing the misrepresentation. This type of misrepresentation does damage beyond the two people in the interaction itself. It's one more piece of straw placed on America's back. Many in the vast media landscape often purposefully misquote or misrepresent others that they disagree with, typically those on the other side of the political aisle, as they need to keep their viewers angry at the other side to keep them engaged. Most people are aware the other side of the aisle often misrepresents those on their side, but I worry that many don't understand or don't care that many on their side misrepresent many on the other side as well. This is not a problem with just one side. Do I think Sam maliciously and purposefully misrepresented what I said for some personal gain? No, I highly doubt that's the case. The problem is that I think, as with so many on the left and right, Sam has been taught to react emotionally to claims made by those on the other side of the aisle, to discount almost anything said by them and to accept as true almost anything said by those on their side. Since the media tends to push emotional manipulation over logical reasoning, as it's easier and more profitable, people are learning to default to emotional reactions instead of logical reactions. One of the consequences of reacting emotionally to simple claims is that it's very, very easy to accidentally misunderstand what was said. Once emotions are really involved, humans lose the ability to think critically. Once that's gone, we have a difficult time parsing anything other than the most simple of statements. We lose all nuance. We begin to jump to conclusions. We interpret what we read or hear in the worst possible way, which is usually wrong. We can see when others do that to us or those we agree with, but we are unable to see, or again don't care, when our side misrepresents the other. This issue has much broader ramifications than a short Twitter interaction. As we raise the younger generation, we are ingraining them with these horrible habits. We are beginning to create a more solid foundation of dishonesty, apathy, and ignorance. The further we take this dishonesty, the more difficult it will be to come back from it. The further the country becomes divided, the worse it will get for all of us. Nobody wins when we act like this, except some media companies and politicians. And it makes us very susceptible to the deceptive practices of the media and politicians, and I don't think that any of us want to be deceived. But if we're unaware of them attempting to deceive us this way, then we're most likely going to be unsuccessful at stopping it. We have to do better in our own lives. When we feel any emotions welling up in response to something like this, we have to stop, take stock, and be even more aware of what is actually being said, not what our emotions or the media push us to think was said. We have to decide what's more important, anger at the other side and forming our beliefs on that, or the truth, which is the only thing that will allow us to all improve our lives. That's all for today. Thank you very much for the view. If you disagree with anything I've talked about, please let me know in the comments. I do take them seriously. If you gain anything from my videos, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments how I can improve. It helps more than you might realize. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day. Goodbye.